Grace to you and peace. I hope today's morning devotion finds you doing well. We're turning to the Revelation of John this morning, to the 12th chapter. Our reading is the first six verses, but I encourage you to go ahead and read the whole section. It's fascinating. Presbyterians, we really don't know what to do with Revelation. It's filled with all kinds of strange images and characters, trumpets blowing and bowls pouring and riders coming forth from the skies. In the first century, it was filled with meaning for a church facing incredibly challenging times. But in the 21st century, its mythical images feel far removed from our everyday lives. Today's reading from Revelation 12 is a great example. We meet a pregnant woman who is clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, a crown of 12 stars atop her head. She's often identified as Israel, or perhaps Mary, or the church. We meet her child, who immediately after being born is snatched away and taken to God and to God's throne. That's assumed to be Jesus. We meet a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns. He's named in the passage as the devil, Satan, but he's also identified with the Roman Empire. If we read beyond verse 6, we're introduced to the archangel Michael, who runs an army of angels. They cast the great dragon out of heaven and down to earth. It's just plain wild. Now, some people read Revelation like a prophecy of the future, a sort of fortune telling, attaching current people and events to discern the end of days. While I appreciate how seriously they take Revelation, that line of interpretation assumes that the book has meant absolutely nothing to 2,000 years of Christians who have read it, certainly not to the 7 churches of Asia who read it sometime around the end of the 1st century AD. Others, they just simply ignore the book, finding it too fantastic to understand in our present context. Some Protestant reformers didn't even want it included in the canon. I'm not sure that's a faithful option. Perhaps a better take is to understand Revelation in its original context in order to see what it says to ours. In the 1st century, Revelation offered a powerful word of hope to a church suffering at the hands of worldly powers. It was also a challenge to congregations that had gotten a little too comfortable with the ways of the world. It served as a reminder that their world was part of a much bigger picture, something cosmic. On a cosmic scale, the war had been won, Revelation proclaimed. While evil was still wreaking havoc with them in the world, that was simply the last gasps of a desperate dragon whose days were numbered. Surely that was good news to the saints of the 7 churches of Asia. Surely it's good news for us today as well. Our world's a mess. COVID-19 is rearing its ugly head, surging forth again, exerting its power of death, just like a dragon that just won't die. The election is pulling our nation taut with tension. Lawsuits are already being filed in North Carolina, Florida, Wisconsin, Ohio, Texas, Nevada, Arizona, and New Jersey, just to name a few, over ballots and election procedures. Confusion and chaos will likely define the coming days in our nation. Perhaps John's vision of the big picture, the cosmic picture, can give us hope. God wins. Righteousness ultimately prevails. Dr. King's statement was right. The arc of history is long, but it indeed bends toward justice. In the midst of the mayhem of these days on the earth, the battles raging in our time, may we find comfort in the cosmic truth that God has already won the war. Take care, my friends, and God bless. Would you pray with me? Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is even now in heaven. Amen. Be well.